Tom and Grace Miller were still basking in the glow of newlywed life, having been married for just under a year. Their days were simple yet full of promise, a tender tapestry woven with love, laughter, and shared dreams. They had recently moved into a cozy little house on Maple Street, the kind with a white picket fence and a garden that seemed to whisper of new beginnings. It was their haven, a quiet corner of the world where they planned to build their future together. Tom and Grace Miller had built a life filled with quiet routines and shared dreams. Grace, a compassionate nurse at the local hospital, often came home drained but fulfilled after long shifts. Tom, a focused software developer, worked tirelessly in his cozy study. Together, they embraced the ordinary comforts of their new home on Maple Street, a sanctuary where they envisioned a bright future. That afternoon was no different. Sunlight streamed through the large living room windows, casting a golden glow on the walls. Grace had curled up on the couch with a steaming cup of tea, her young Labrador puppy, Charlie, snoring softly at her feet. The house hummed with peaceful silence, broken only by the faint clicking of Tom's keyboard in the study. It was the kind of day that should have slipped by unnoticed, a page in the quiet diary of their lives. But then the doorbell rang. Once, twice, 3 times. The sharp sound pierced through the calm, startling Grace. Charlie lifted his head, letting out a low, wary growl. "Tom, could you get that?" Grace called out wearily. Tom sighed, reluctant to tear himself away from his work. He pushed back his chair and headed for the door, expecting nothing out of the ordinary. A neighbor perhaps, or a package delivery. When he opened the door, his heart faltered. Standing on the threshold was a young woman, disheveled and trembling. Her tear-streaked face bore an expression of desperation. She clutched a tiny baby in her arms, swaddled in a faded blue blanket. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking as tears spilled down her cheeks. "Please, I can't take care of him anymore. He's yours now." Tom froze, his mind racing to comprehend her words. Before he could respond, the woman stepped closer and gently placed the baby into his arms. The bundle was impossibly small and warm, sleeping soundly, blissfully unaware of the chaos unfolding around it. The woman thrust a crumpled envelope into Tom's free hand, her fingers trembling as though they could barely let go. Her wide, tear-filled eyes locked with his for a brief moment, silently pleading for understanding. Then, without another word, she turned and fled, disappearing down the stairs as though she were a ghost vanishing into the night. "Wait!" Tom called after her, his voice filled with urgency. But she was already gone. Standing there in stunned silence, Tom looked down at the baby in his arms. It felt impossibly light, yet the weight of the moment pressed down on him like a tidal wave. He stepped back into the house, closing the door behind him as though to seal in this surreal moment. He entered the living room, his face pale and his hands trembling as he carried the tiny bundle. Grace looked up from the couch, her wide eyes locking onto the scene before her. What happened?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Tom didn't answer right away. He simply stood there, holding the baby close, as the enormity of the moment sank in. "Tom, what is this?" Grace asked, her voice trembling between confusion and rising panic. For a fleeting moment, an unthinkable thought crossed her mind. Was this the result of an affair? But just as quickly as the thought came, it vanished. She knew her husband. Tom was loyal, steady, and honest. He wasn't capable of such betrayal. Without a word, Tom handed her the crumpled envelope. They sank into the couch together, the baby nestled between them, and began to read the letter inside. Each word weighed heavier than the last. "I gave birth to this child 3 months ago," the letter began. "He is paralyzed from the waist down. His father left us when he learned the truth. My family has turned their backs on me, and I am completely alone. I have no means to give him the life he deserves." The handwriting was shaky, each stroke of the pen betraying the anguish behind the words. The woman continued to explain that she had seen Grace at the hospital during a shift. She had been struck by her kindness, her patience, and her unwavering dedication to her patients. It was Grace's compassion that had convinced her that Grace was the only person who could give her child a chance at a better life. The letter ended with a desperate plea. "Please forgive me. I'm only doing this because I love him." Beside the letter was a legal document granting Tom and Grace temporary custody of the baby. It was signed, but there was no birth certificate, no name, nothing that could tie the woman to her child. It was as though she had erased herself from his life entirely, leaving only this fragile hope for his future. The room fell silent as Tom and Grace sat with the letter in their hands, the baby quietly breathing between them. The weight of the moment settled over them, filling the air with 1,000 unspoken thoughts and questions. Finally, it was Grace who broke the silence. She reached down and gently touched the baby's tiny hand, her voice soft but resolute. "We can't just ignore this," she said, her words carrying the certainty of someone who had spent her life caring for others. "He's here now. He needs us." Tom nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the baby. "But are we ready for this?" he asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "This is so much bigger than anything we've ever planned." Grace looked at him, her eyes filled with equal parts determination and tenderness. "We might not feel ready, but maybe no one ever is," she said quietly. "But he doesn't have anyone else. We are his chance." Tom looked down at the baby, his tiny fingers curling slightly in his sleep. In that moment, he realized that their ordinary life on Maple Street had been forever changed. Grace took a deep breath, steadying herself. "No one is ever really ready for something like this," she said softly. "But we can do it. Together." At that moment, the baby stirred, its tiny eyes fluttering open. Though far too young to understand what was happening, it seemed to look at them both with a curious innocence. Then, just for a fleeting second, a small smile appeared on the baby's lips. That tiny gesture pierced through all of Grace and Tom's doubts, reaching the deepest corners of their hearts. "Welcome home, little man," Grace whispered, her voice full of warmth and resolve. Instinctively, she cradled the baby in her arms, gently rocking him and whispering soothing words. Though her mind swirled with questions and uncertainty, her heart knew what to do. The baby let out a soft, contented sigh before drifting back into a peaceful sleep. Tom and Grace exchanged a look, a silent conversation filled with worry, determination, and something else, an unspoken promise. They didn't have all the answers, but they knew one thing for sure. They would not abandon this child. In the days that followed, the bond between them and the baby grew stronger. They decided to name him Oliver, a name that felt strong and hopeful. The adjustment to their new life was challenging. Oliver needed immediate medical attention to understand the extent of his paralysis. Grace leaned on her medical expertise and connections to arrange quick appointments with pediatric specialists. Their visits brought mixed emotions. The paralysis was confirmed as permanent, but the doctors assured them that Oliver could live a full and happy life with the right care, therapy, and support. It was a daunting road ahead, but for Tom and Grace, it was enough to have a plan and a chance to give Oliver the love he deserved. Grace took a leave of absence from work to care for Oliver, while Tom adjusted his work schedule to help at home. Their days were a whirlwind of sleepless nights, doctor visits, and endless diaper changes. Despite the exhaustion, they adapted, finding joy in Oliver's giggles and the small victories that came with each day. One crisp morning, fate surprised them again. Grace stepped into the backyard and found a tiny, shivering puppy huddled against the fence. Its fur was matted, and it looked frightened and frail. Without hesitation, Grace scooped the puppy into her arms. "Tom, he's all alone," she said when he hesitated. Reluctantly, Tom agreed. They named the puppy Max and nursed him back to health. Max was skittish at first, wary of people and especially cautious around Oliver. But over time, with Grace's patience and Tom's persistence, the little dog began to trust. One day, during a walk with Tom, Max wagged his tail for the first time. A small but meaningful breakthrough. Soon, Max's loyalty blossomed. He became Oliver's constant companion, curling up beside him during naps and barking protectively at visitors. "He's like a little guardian," Grace said with a smile, watching Max nuzzle against Oliver's blanket. Life became a dance of challenges and love. Grace returned to work, balancing long shifts with caring for Oliver, while Tom managed the home front. They were exhausted but fulfilled, their lives now brimming with purpose and love. One evening, their routine was interrupted when Oliver developed a fever that refused to subside. Concerned, they rushed him to the hospital. The drive was tense, with Tom trying to reassure Grace as she held Oliver close. After hours of tests and waiting, the doctor delivered unexpected news. Oliver has a rare condition that causes temporary paralysis. There's a chance he may regain control of his legs, the doctor explained. The words left Tom and Grace stunned. Relief mingled with uncertainty as they clung to the hope of a miracle. Though the outcome was uncertain, they were given clear instructions for care and therapy to support Oliver's recovery. In the weeks that followed, they poured every ounce of energy into helping Oliver. They celebrated small victories, a wiggle of his toes, a stronger grip of his hand. The road was long, but their hope never wavered. Max seemed to understand the significance of these moments, often nudging Oliver gently with his nose or curling up beside him. Together, this unlikely family faced each day with courage, their hearts bound by love and the belief that brighter days lay ahead. Charlie had become more than just a family dog. He was Oliver's guardian, his constant protector. He would curl up next to Oliver's crib, his ears perked, as if he understood the little boy's vulnerability. One quiet evening, while Grace was out running errands and Tom had drifted off on the couch, Charlie's sharp instincts saved the day. A faint clatter woke him. He bolted upright and darted to Oliver's room. There, he saw the toddler wriggling restlessly in his crib, his tiny body slipping perilously through the bars. Oliver's head was dangerously close to the edge, and his paralyzed legs made it impossible for him to pull himself back. Without hesitation, Charlie leaped toward the crib. He positioned himself beneath Oliver, ready to cushion the fall, and gently nudged the baby with his snout, whining to alert someone. His efforts bought precious seconds until Tom woke to the sound of Oliver's cries. Rushing to the nursery, Tom found a heart-stopping scene. Charlie, small and brave, holding Oliver steady. He carefully scooped his son into his arms, his eyes welling with tears as he realized the depth of Charlie's loyalty. Oliver's tiny hands reached out, grasping Charlie's fur as if to thank him. When Grace returned home, she found the three of them together. Tom sitting in the armchair, Oliver nestled in his arms, and Charlie curled protectively at their feet. Without a word, Grace sat beside them, overwhelmed with gratitude. Despite the trials they faced, their family bond felt unshakable. In the weeks that followed, small signs of progress emerged. Oliver's legs began to show tiny movements, sparking hope. After months of physical therapy and tireless care, the moment they'd long dreamed of finally came. Oliver stood on his own for the first time. Tears of joy streamed down Tom and Grace's faces as they watched their son take his first wobbly steps. Charlie barked excitedly, bounding around Oliver as if celebrating the triumph alongside them. Their lives gradually settled into a rhythm. Oliver grew into a lively toddler whose laughter filled the house, while Charlie remained his steadfast companion, always at his side. Together, they created a home brimming with love and resilience. One sunny afternoon, the family enjoyed a picnic in the backyard. Oliver, now 2, chased Charlie across the lawn, his giggles echoing in the air. Grace and Tom sat on a blanket, their hands clasped as they watched their son play. Sometimes, Grace said softly, "The unexpected challenges bring the greatest blessings." Tom squeezed her hand and smiled. "And together, we can handle anything." But their story wasn't over. That evening, as they prepared for a quiet night, the doorbell rang. Charlie barked and ran to the door, with Oliver toddling after him. Tom opened it only to freeze in shock. Standing there was Carla, Oliver's birth mother, accompanied by a man. Grace joined Tom, her heart pounding. Recognizing Carla immediately, she felt a wave of uncertainty. Had Carla come to reclaim Oliver? But Carla made no move to enter. Instead, she handed Tom an envelope. "This is for you," she said quietly before turning and walking away. Inside, they found legal documents and a letter. Carla explained her decision to leave Oliver in their care. She wrote of her gratitude and love for her son, but reassured them she had no intention of contesting custody. "I made this decision out of love," the letter read. "I will never disrupt the life you've built for him. Thank you for giving him the home I couldn't." Grace wiped away tears as she finished reading. "It's over," Tom said softly, taking her hand. Just as they began to process the emotional revelation, Grace turned to Tom with a small smile. "I have something else to tell you." Tom's eyes searched hers, a mix of curiosity and concern. "I'm pregnant," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. For a moment, the room was silent. Then a bright smile spread across Tom's face, and he pulled her into a tight embrace. "Another miracle," he whispered. Months passed, and the Millers' lives flourished. Oliver, fully recovered, ran joyfully around the garden with Charlie at his side. The bond between them was unbreakable. One afternoon, as they relaxed in the backyard, Grace leaned against Tom and said, "Life's unexpected twists really do bring the greatest blessings." Tom smiled, his gaze on their growing family. "And whatever the future holds, we'll face it together." In that moment, surrounded by laughter and love, the Millers knew they had created a life full of hope, joy, and endless possibilities.